Jumping into the reception.
Remember who always.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a nice little job for somebody retired.
Yeah.
Jimmy's on board.
Right there.
All right. So we really, I'm gonna go ahead and go live. I'm unmute you now.
I think it's a little Harris. Not for COVID.
Can you hear us, Jeremy? Yep.
Is that Mount Shasta term?
That's probably.
I'm a little disappointed, that's Weaver Valley.
Oh, it's out of my district.
Are you guys all set to proceed?
We're good.
Oh.
We're good. Mics are on, video's on, we're good to go.
All right. Good, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the special meeting on July 30th. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For any delay I have in my video feed. If anybody has any Zoom issues, technical issues, please use the chat function. We'll go ahead and open up our board meeting to public hearings, planning and zoning. Item 1.1, conduct a public hearing to consider introducing, waiving the reading of and extending urgency ordinance 315-850 enacted on June 15th of 2021, imposing a temporary moratorium on the issuance of new commercial cannabis cultivation licenses in and the transfer of existing CCLs into the Lewiston community area for 10 months and 15 days. Unknown fiscal impact.
Chairman Brown, if I may, point of order. This is Jim Underwood on Zoom.
Yes, please go ahead, Jim.
I'm just not seeing any opportunity for public comment on the agenda. And the reason for raising this is to ask the chair whether this would be the appropriate time to comment on behalf of my client as it relates to item 2.1, depending on whether the board would intend to reopen the public hearing for comments on that matter at that time. If there's not going to be an opportunity to comment later, I would comment or request to be heard during the required public comment period instead.
This is Margaret Long.
Okay, yeah.
Special meetings do not have generalized public comment. Each item will have individual public comment.
Each item will. Thank you very much.
All right. Unless there's any other questions, then we can go ahead and proceed with 1.1.
This is Kim Hunter, the Building Planning Director. This is indeed an extension. It's the first extension of urgency ordinance for an extension or expansion of the Lewiston opt-out area. This was originally adopted, the initial ordinance was adopted for the 45-day period in June, on June 15th. Today is the 45th day, and we're seeking approval of the extension for 10 months and 15 days. I can go into details. I think we've presented this before. You heard the information on June 15th. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. One correction I do want to make is under the discussion in the staff report, it noted there are currently 3 existing commercial cannabis licenses issued in this new extended Lewiston opt-out area. However, that's only 2 licenses. We determined that the 3rd license in question was actually already in the existing opt-out. There are then 2 pending applications that have previously been noticed for approval. And then 1 pending application is being evaluated that was that came to our attention. It had been put in our permitting system wrong. We weren't aware it was pending in this opt-out area, and we're evaluating that application right now. So if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those for you.
Any questions from the board members? Please proceed at your own will.
This is Keith. Margaret, I have a question about the what could be added to the ordinance. In our other licensing ordinances, manufacturing has an opt-out also. Is it possible to add manufacturing into this temporary opt-out for this at this time?
So yes, this would be the opportunity to make any changes that you would like to it. You would articulate the basic land use reason for doing that, an emergency basis for it as well. But yes, it can be done at this time. Again, we can only hear this 3 times, so this would be the proper opportunity to make revisions to it as we're establishing permit ordinance.
Thank you, Margaret.
So I would like to also add something maybe in the future, or for this one here, that it seems like in both opt-out areas that we've had, Lewiston and Rush Creek Estates, that it turns out that it's not the legal cannabis grower that's causing the problem, it's the illegal ones in there. And if there's anything we can do before we do an opt-out, maybe we throw 3 or 4 months of enforcement in to make sure that we're not just getting rid of the 1 or 2 or 3 legal ones, but the 8 or 10 or 12 illegal ones, which I think would be a good remedy for the people in the opt-out zones, these ones and the ones down the road, because it seems like we're not really remedying the problem completely by dealing with the legal. I think the illegal in both of these are probably far worse than the legal, so I'd like to see the illegal grows in there get a little bit of attention, and dealing with the legal ones the way we have has been satisfactory for me. Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions from the board? All right, hearing none, we'll open it up to public comment, please. Dr. Coons, is there anybody on Zoom that is ready to make public comment?
So Susie is taking care of that from off-site, so we're looking right now.
Yes, we have Paul Hauser.
Yeah, thank you for letting me speak on this. I would support what was implied by Keith's question, in that I do think that it would be an excellent idea to include prohibition against manufacturing in this opt-out. I think when people choose to establish an opt-out, they really want to opt out of all cannabis activities. But what I wanted to advocate for more specifically is consistency, like was talked about when this when the Rush Creek opt-out renewal came up. And the Rush Creek opt-out does not allow transfers in. And it gets to this grandfathering issue of, is it really grandfathering, or are we trying to convey a right to sell in perpetuity? I would say it's the former. And I'd like to point out that the county's certified EIR states in paragraph ES 2.2 that two of the principal objectives of the county cannabis program shall be to avoid detrimental impacts on communities and neighborhoods. That is really the purpose of the opt-outs, and also to align the county's commercial cannabis regulations with state requirements. And I'd like to point out that CDFA regulation 8202 prohibits transfers of cultivation licenses. So the state prohibits transfers of cultivation licenses. Given that, and this desire for consistency, and that the Rush Creek opt-out is already established, no transfers, I would like to advocate that that change also be made to the Lewiston opt-out, so that transfers would not be allowed in this opt-out as well. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for your comments. If there's another Zoom person that would like to make public comment, please raise your hand. Or if there's anyone in the board chambers that is there to make public comment, Dr. Coons, feel free to.
All right, I'm just checking with Susie to make sure there's no more on Zoom. If not, we'll close the Zoom and move over to the audience in the board chambers.
I'm not sure if I'm still live, but bear with me. My computer seems to have froze.
Well, we'll go ahead and start the one in the audience here then until you can get back on. So if that's okay with you, Chair, we'll go ahead and do public comment from the boardroom.
Sounds great.
Hello.
Tony Miller, Lewiston. Also wanted to support consistency to the Rush Creek opt-out. And we're also going down the road of, licenses that might be, possibly pending or with intent. There's been substantial, without a doubt, majority of the community in this opt-out expansion been working diligently with time, taking time off work, coming forward to support this opt-out. So I just asked the board to, it was, brought up that it was licensings that are mixed up in handling and different things, but just some clarity for the members, because a lot of these licenses are the exact reason why this community has stepped forward to initiate this opt-out zone and to have additional license to suddenly show up or to appear in our opt-out zone. I'd like just to keep that looking clean. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Andy Wakefield, Lewiston. I'll have to respectfully disagree with you, Liam. We're still fresh in our memory. In my situation in Mountain View, a very tight-knit, very small little residential area. We all know what everybody's doing. There are no illegal grows there. Sure, there are people growing some plants behind their house. We don't care about that. But it's the existing commercial grow and the newly commercial grow that just happened. As to, we don't understand how that happened. Those are the problems in our particular area. So although you may have, there may be some, you may be right about certain cases, and in our particular situation, Mountain View in Lewiston, it's absolutely the commercial growers that are causing all the problems. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I need my notes. Good morning. I'm Gail Ward, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my husband, who've been residents in this area of the opt-out since 1998. It's obvious by now that the majority of property owners within this opt-out area that you approved on June 15th want this urgency ordinance to be extended. All of the conditions which existed when you approved the urgency opt-out still exist. In fact, the water situation is becoming more dire. Initially, our main concern about water was the potential of contamination of our water source. But with the extended drought, a greater concern has taken precedence, and that's the availability of water itself. This little valley is occupied mostly by small family parcels, and there has always been a sufficient water table to sustain the residents. But the commercial cannabis farms with thousands of plants need a much greater amount of water to sustain their crop. Even if they're not drawing directly from the creek or river, they are depleting our water table to the point that one day we all fear we'll turn on our taps and no water will come out. You already extended one urgency opt-out in Lewiston for Rush Creek a second time. We are asking that you grant our first extension so that both of these Lewiston opt-outs can be aligned and made permanent until such time that you create and approve, can be aligned and made permanent when you are able to make that ordinance permanent, dealing with the incongruity of commercial cannabis in residential areas. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there additional public comment, speaker?
Good morning. Hello? Hello?
We're not taking comments from Zoom right now. We're doing the boardroom, and then we'll come back to the Zoom.
Good morning, Crystal Bell, Lewiston. A few points that I wanted to bring up is, one, considering the staff report of having the 5 licenses in this area and potential, the 2 that are already licensed, 2 that have been, as they say, pending in 1 application. I think that I would urge you to please clarify this in the language of the ordinance as to what will be grandfathered into this opt-out at this stage. The 1 application, obviously, was never issued. The ordinance does say that you cannot issue. And because there's an application, it is not issued, therefore it should not be in this opt-out area. The other 2 that were at one point approved, it was on the county's own action that you withdrew that approval and never issued those licenses. So with that as well, those were not issued and they should not belong in this opt-out. So I'd urge you to make sure that that gets clarified in this language. Also, I would like to see some language added into this that discuss what the restrictions are on the grandfathered licenses. As far as what they can and cannot do, there's been discussion that they remain status quo, but there is no language that specifies what that means, and that language even in itself is not in the ordinance. So for our own protection and for theirs as well, it would be, I would urge you once again to please add language in there to say what happens if they violate the rules of this ordinance or violate state and or local rules. We talk about the majority, I did a little calculation of our 2 hearings, the letters that have been submitted, and when we talk about majority, not only were there a majority with the petitions that were filed, but in this community, there have been 56 at this point in time, 56 speakers on letters submitted in support of our opt-out and in support of not allowing transfers with ownership. On the opposed, there's been 16. Of those 56, 31 of those people are property owners in this area. For the opposed, 3 people. So, I mean, I think that's a good illustration of the majority and why we're here. And we wish these people well in their endeavors, but we ask that they just not be allowed in our area, please. Thank you.
Gene Grossman, Chris, Cape Fork. You know, I've actually never really had a problem with any of the carve-outs. I've always supported it. You don't want it in your neighborhood, so that's great. I got a problem with hypocrisy, and I think that there's an incredible side-by-side comparison in the carve-out in Lewiston. My biggest problem is that there's larger ag parcels that have been carved out. I don't know what the exposure of that is for the county of people being restricted on their rightfully zoned ag parcels. But there's a winery that's got 12 acres of vineyards on a rural residential parcel with a retail location on site, directly next door to 2 cannabis licenses. No permits for the winery, no water diversion that's registered. I know that 12 acres of grapes right now in this temperature is probably using 30 to 40,000 gallons a day. A 10,000 square foot cannabis license is using about 2,500 gallons a day. So I'm not saying no carve out, I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, but we literally have side-by-side business comparisons. One of them is insanely regulated, using a fraction of the natural resources, and is damn near forbid from using surface water. The other one is operating totally unregulated by the county on an improperly zoned parcel. I think there probably is places that there should be carve-outs, but I think that, as everybody in the room is saying, it's all about appropriate zoning. But I think that the conversation, especially in a carve-out area, really needs to be looked at all of the businesses in appropriate zoning. I sincerely wish that some of the comments were true earlier, that the biggest problems in Lewiston were a couple licensed cannabis farms. But I go through Lewiston on a fairly regular basis, and I can tell you that there's far greater problems in that community than a couple cannabis farms. A lot of other drug use, a lot of poverty, second lowest real estate values in the county, followed only by the other carve-out, or led by the only other carve-out. So I think that we got to look at the detriment in communities as a whole. Real estate values have dropped significantly with the carve-out. So thanks a lot.
Any additional comments from the boardroom?
Chair, board members, Lisa Wright, Lewiston. I know you're going to approve the extension because that's been your history and you typically stick to precedent. I would, however, like to highly discourage you from this practice in the future. Carving out broad swaths of land that has appropriate zoning for a use, long-term is not a good land use planning solution. Trying to get attention here.
We're watching.
Oh, you watch me, okay. I'm like, they're all looking down. We have a general plan now that has been funded and is going to be underway. So I really would like to see you refrain from making decisions that are impacting legally zoned parcels. You already have an urgency ordinance that prevents new applications from being submitted. That may take 6 months, it may take a year until new applications are open. But in the meantime, you're basically, I had this printed out and I wish I would remember to bring it, is you have a dozen or so large ag parcels in this new carve-out. Some of them 40 acres or more, and you're saying to them, you're not allowed to use your parcel in an agricultural way. It really doesn't have anything to do with that residential area and the small parcels. These are larger ag parcels. And if you look at the map that was included with the Lewiston Grass Valley group, you'll see in the bottom corner where the existing licenses exist, what abuts that on the upper side is all ag land. So you're basically taking away a property right from someone without really valid justification. I don't see any findings of fact that really establish a health or safety risk either. So I think that this ordinance is very weak on that account. I would urge you to please refrain from doing this. We have an upcoming general plan. We can work on zoning, but what you're doing is you're feeding the prejudice against cannabis in general, and you're allowing legally, highly regulated cannabis farms to be lumped in with the illegal, who might be doing bad things, and there is record of that, and has happened in the past. But to lump it all together, I think you're feeding this new reefer madness that is coming out of these areas with misinformation and allowing that to be perpetuated. So I'm asking you, please refrain from urgency ordinances. I know you're going to pass this one. It's been your history. I'm opposed to carve-outs in general. I think it's detrimental for all the reasons I stated. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Any additional comments from the board chambers?
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tom Malenko, Douglas City. I wanted to kind of follow up on what the last speaker was talking about. If you look specifically in the ordinance on page 4, which is the map, I think it lays out some of this conversation, because everybody's saying, oh, commercial cannabis doesn't belong in residential areas. There's a decent argument for that, or at least in residential areas that don't want it there. But if you look at that map, there's kind of a clear definition. On the left side, you see a lot of small parcels that really fit the definition of residential. They are zoned rural residential, but it is what, at least in Trinity County, we would consider residential. Then you look on the right side, and these are large parcels that are zoned ag and ag forest. Some of them 40-acre parcels. And unlike on the left side of the map, where the overwhelming majority of the map is orange, that means people who signed the petition. On the right side, in this lower right corner, you're looking at 12 parcels. Of those, only 3 of those 12 signed the petition. 2 of them are active cannabis licensees, and the rest didn't sign the petition. So while this carve-out may apply appropriately to these smaller parcels that are Trinity County residential on the left side of the map, I think extending it into this clearly ag land on the right side is not appropriate. And further, again, this is the mechanism we have. We've seen it before. We know it's not the best ideal for planning, and in one of the findings, it says there's no other alternative. This is a perfect example where an HOA could be formed and lock these rules in. And I'd love to see these carve-out zones or proposed zones go that route, undertake as a community their own rules and implement CC&Rs. There's mechanisms to do that instead of this backwards planning mechanism. Anyway, thank you.
Good morning, Joan Carr, I'm from Lewiston. Just following up on those comments about creating HOAs and CC&Rs. For those of us who have long been residents of Grass Valley Creek area, new development should not impose an onus on the existing people who are already there. New development has to carry its own burden. So suggesting that HOAs and CC&Rs is the correct mechanism to control this new development by putting HOAs and CC&Rs on existing development makes no sense. So I urge you to extend the urgency ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any additional comments from the board chambers? If not, Dr. Coombs, could you please pull someone from the Zoom chat function?
If I may just briefly, I've already spoken once.
I know that I was up here briefly once.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's only 3 minutes per, very
I
sorry.
wasn't even near my 3 minutes.
Well, but you had your 3 minutes, thank you.
So Andy, I got a question for you. Yes, sir. So when you spoke back to me about my response. Yes. So did I hear correct that you're good with the state 6 and maybe some more than that? I don't care if you want to grow 1 million plants, to tell you the truth. Right. But take it out of the small residential areas where we're trying to raise our kids. Sure, I didn't. That's basically my point. I get it, but I didn't know. And yeah, I don't care if you want to grow a few plants, or my position is, and I would say that the majority of the people that signed our petition last year, that was disregarded completely. They all don't care if you want to grow behind your house a few plants.
I'm sorry, we're way out of order here. This isn't a time to have discussion with an individual board member, so we're during public comment, so I'm very sorry, but we need to end this.
All right. I'll be happy to talk to you later, Lynn.
I'll just take one more in the board chambers. On a right, Weaverville. My questions to everybody that signed this petition that wants no legal, regulated industry near them, not arguing against next door to your house, residential areas, but do we have the right picture of who we're talking about? Do we have the right imagery in our head of the individuals who are actually going to be affected by this? Or do we have pictured different types of people from different places that are scaring us? And there's a lot of fear. It's a lot of rhetoric that actually scares me as an individual in this community and actually in these carve-out areas where I live. I am more scared of discriminatory rhetoric that is sweeping an industry that they're taking from criminal activities that cannot directly be applied to individuals who are actively not involved in criminal activities. It's scary to me because as a consultant and as a representative of some of these license holders in these areas, they're all families, they're all small business owners, and they all give back to our community, whether that's their children in our schools, donations that they attempt to give, whatever it is. If we're talking about community, community is supposed to be equivalent with inclusivity and with being open to opportunities. And so, kind of following up on Lisa's comments, of course, of this reefer madness that's coming up, this rhetoric is actually much scarier to me than the licensed individuals that have to jump through their multiple hoops every year to keep their business alive during a pandemic. I'm more comfortable with those individuals than I am with most of the people in this room right now. So I just want to consider that. What are we perpetuating as a community in Trinity County? Are we going to keep perpetuating this reefer madness and dichotomizing who is in the program and that these are bad people by the way they look or what they do? That overall, no matter if we're talking about cannabis or alcohol or tobacco or whatever industry, is dangerous for this community. And so I would echo the questions around where is the real urgency behind continuing really discriminatory rhetoric and making people in this community that may not be participating in discrimination feel even more uncomfortable. Thank you so much.
Hi, Nancy Anderson, Lewiston. I'll say that I do support the opt-out. I hope that you guys will extend it with some modifications possibly to be more consistent about transfers, which has already been mentioned. Mr. Hauser brought up state language in the states, how transfers are not even supposed to be allowed. But that's already been spoken to. I'd like to address what I think is needed, and with board support and the whole community, I really would like to see more unity instead of division on people that are doing this legally. I would support anything they're doing. I wish there was some sort of a organization of the two groups to meet on a regular basis to end a lot of what I think there's rhetoric on both sides. But I can only speak for my side because I haven't spoken with the other side. That there's no reefer madness, there is not a discriminatory comment that I've heard in any of our gatherings and meetings. So I believe the bottom line is we just want to maintain a community that is, I'd say, more concerned about water than anything else. The quality of life is a big issue. I don't see a discriminatory comment ever in any of our meetings. It is simply to preserve the wellness of our community. And I would spearhead and be a part of and leading or cooperating with any kind of a joint connection between the two sides. I offer myself as a resource for getting that started. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments. Are there any additional comments from the board chambers? Dr. Coons, are there any additional comments from Zoom?
Yeah, I think we have a few on Zoom, but we still have people here, so we'll go ahead and just complete this one. Thank you. Sorry.
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Lori Wills from Lewiston. I just want to echo what Nancy just said. There's no discrimination here. This is not about discrimination or what our neighbors look like. This is about what our neighbors are doing in our community. And one thing I want to touch on, and I hope you read my letter, we have been very diligent about researching these approved licenses in our neighborhoods. And we've done that through public records requests. We've reviewed the county cannabis files. We have obtained the state files. And we have all the data. And I want to speak specifically to the transfers. And number one, well, let me back up. Number one, you've already voted to approve the urgency ordinance. We've proven to you without a doubt, with a 5-0 vote, there is a threat in our community. We feel that threat. And we attended a town hall meeting last night where Supervisor Groves encouraged us to participate in the upcoming general plan update so we could design our community. That's what we're doing here today. That's what we've been doing the last year. It's taken us a year to get here, to get this opt-out approved. So thank you for that. Now I'm asking you to please, we're all asking you, don't allow the transfers. The licenses in our community, and let's just focus on our community. They've already changed ownership 9 times. We got that through public records requests. Those are facts. We're not making that up. We're not here to deflect. We're telling you, why is this, we're asking you, why is this happening, and why would you consider allowing it to continue? Because we never know who's coming in next. And yes, we've had someone in, and you've heard me say every time, and you know, he's been convicted. He's threatened, he and his employees have threatened our residents and our neighbors. So there is a threat. And we're worried every time they change hands, who's coming in next? So the other point I wanted to make is following up, so there's 2 for sale, again. Okay, and when everybody's talking about these 40-acre parcels, yes, they were bought by prospective growers. And one of the parcels was up for sale. I presented that at the first opt-out hearing. And now another parcel that hasn't been licensed, that's pending, that Director Hunter's talking about, now that one's up for sale. So I'm telling you, there's a revolving door. We're asking you to please close it. Thank you.
All right, Chair Brown, it appears we have no one left in the lobby, and it looks like we have 2 people on Zoom. Susie will let them through.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with Daniel Cucci.
Hello, thank you. This is Daniel Cucci with Abbott and Kinderman, represent owner in the Lewiston area. Just a couple of things. One, first, I'd like to echo the comments about discrimination. There's not been a meeting yet that I have not heard that exact thing about my client. I just heard it again today. They keep trying to impose upon my client who simply just bought a piece of property. The criminal activity is some guy who did horrible things somewhere else, but they keep trying to impose that on my client. I mean, I can't think of another type of overtly ridiculous thing to keep doing to my client, and they just keep doing it despite understanding and knowing that this person has nothing to do with my client. So I just need to clear that up first. Second, I would reiterate that any desire to change the whole transfer opportunity if there was a sale of a property, it has both a practical and a legal problem. One, the findings just frankly do not support the claim that would recognize an imminent threat. There's really no difference between this, who's operating the same operation under all the same rules. There's no increase or new effect. And then 2, just practical. I mean, that has a very substantial direct impact on the value of the property and their investment. And I think that shouldn't be discounted. And lastly, frankly, we did not ultimately oppose the version that was adopted. And we would not oppose its continued extension under its current version. And frankly, I respectfully disagree. I think you would put the extension at serious legal risk entirely if you do amendments to it at this time. I think the 65858 statute only talks about extensions. It does not talk about amended extensions. I think there's a real risk that this would be considered a new ordinance, and the statute very well could end up leading to everything expiring tonight at midnight. So I would urge you just to extend, if you are inclined to extend, that you just extend it as it was drafted at this time. Thank you.
Okay, the next public comment we have is from Candace Bow. Apologize if I got your last name wrong. Candace, are you there?
So is that all we have in Zoom?
Oh, I just had another one raise their hand. Candace, can you unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. Thank you for giving me this chance to speak. I'm speaking on behalf of me and my husband. We just got the property where we in the end of March of this year, and we're looking into a community where it's safe and to do business there. And we just got this opt-out on the urgency ordinance here, and we feel that we didn't get the voting here, and we're not understanding when we bought the property. It was our concern that, and our impression that, we could go ahead and do a commercial legal cultivation here in our property is in the agriculture zone. So when we heard about this urgency from their agent from Florida agency, and it's not something that can do our business in the long term here. And so I asked the Board of Supervisor to please refrain their acre lot to not include into this here, because that's one of our concerns, that when we have bought the property here, it was for the right thing. We want to follow the county regulation, the process to get it in legally. So I asked the Board of Supervisors, please take a look, reframe their ordinance here to here for the bigger lots not to be in this opt-out urgency ordinance to be in a box. Thank you for letting me speak.
Okay, next it looks like we have somebody by the name of Miller. I don't know if that's a last name or a first name.
Yes, hello, it's Heidi Miller, thank you.
Thanks, go ahead, Heidi.
Yes, thank you, Board. I just wanted to say that my family, we have lived in the Lewiston community for 2 decades now. We've raised 2 children by this beautiful community. And we are not controversial people whatsoever. But when things are not okay, when things are not right, we're going to step in and we're going to have a voice. And the thing of it is today is we need to remember that this is industrial cannabis that we're talking about, not the small grow. Commercial cannabis. I live next to one of the largest grows in Trinity County that holds the largest power of Trinity County. Our issue is the smell, the odor, the lights, the fans. They are so loud. Other businesses that are there, the wineries that is there, they're not producing these things that are nuisances that we don't know long-term effects about. You know, when the weather is just right and there's a little bit of humidity, the smell is so pungent. It's in my house, in our vehicles. My son and I, sometimes when it's so strong, we're getting headaches. And it's like, this is just not okay. And we can go about saying, oh, let's, you know, build community, bring the sides together. It's, you know, set aside, that's all great, but what it boils down to is that this is a commercial business that should not be allowed in a small residential area. Grow as much as you want, but not in a small residential area. To have the fans on all night long. You know, we submit compliance notices in almost weekly in hopes that, you know, come on out, you know, sit on my deck, take a listen, and at 9 o'clock at night you can start hearing the fans rev up so loud that we can't even hear the creek that is, you know, right next to us. So of course, you know, after a while, trying to be neighborly, trying to just be like, oh, okay, it's not anymore. So, you know, I appreciate everybody's efforts in trying to make a resolve of something that just got completely muddy and out of hand. So I hope today that, you know, the ordinance will be extended with Crystal's comments about these, you know, licenses that are supposedly all of a sudden in now. I hope that's taken into consideration. And hopefully we can move on from this and not have to waste any more energy. So thank you so much for your time.
Okay, that is all of the hands raised and or chat comments that I have received from people on Zoom who wanted to provide public comment.
All right, thank you so much for that, Susie.
Sure. Chairman Brown, I just got another person raise their hand.
Well, that sounds great. Send them through.
All right, Chris W.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Hi, this is Chris Williams from Weaverville. So if this is about water, which is obviously a valid concern during a drought, I just wanted to point out that the winery in Lewiston diverts over 351 million gallons of water just last year. So, and I don't see groups in colorful t-shirts gathered taking up that valuable time. So I just wanted to point that out. So if this is about water, then maybe we need to be looking at everybody's consumption of water. But I do want to just kind of echo what others have said. I think this is just part of, reefer madness. Thank you so much.
Okay, is there anybody else on Zoom who would like to provide public comment? Chairman Brown, I am not seeing anything.
All right, thank you so much for that, Susie. If that'll bring it back to the board.
Jeremy, may I ask questions, staff?
Please, go ahead.
Kim, we know that we have the Rush Creek and we've set a goal of having that done or start the process within 6 months. Can these two be combined in one or done at the same time? So the goal would to start this process for them in the 6-month period also?
Yes, that would be correct. Since both are pending urgency ordinances, they are urgency ordinances, not pending, excuse me. Yes, both of them would be considered in the amendments that we anticipate initiating in the next 6 months.
Okay. And Margaret, you had somebody question your opinion on changing the ordinance. Do you want to make a new statement, or you stand by the fact that this is the time to make changes?
Absolutely, I stand behind. Respond, I stand behind that. The concept of this is to give an opportunity for the board, for staff to develop a permanent ordinance. So it's a stopgap. As it's done on an emergency basis, there are a lot of times that things do need to be revised. The appropriate time to do it is during the reauthorization, because we are not allowed to do it in the interim. So these are the appropriate times to do it. You can make any appropriate amendments to it, and you should if you believe that they are going to benefit. Because again, this is done on an emergency basis. So it's important to continually review and revise it as we go forward.
All right, so there's questions about the clarity of the ordinance. So my understanding of these ordinances, even if you are in and even if you allow transfers, that this ordinance stops people from changing their licenses or going to, say, to try to multi-license or increase the size. Say if they were a cottage, they can't go to a 10,000. Is that clear in the ordinance? Margaret, are you still there?
I am. I saw Kim looking, so I was wondering if she was doing anything.
Okay, all right.
Did it hurt?
So my basis of the questions on it becomes at some point what we would call a non-conforming use. And non-conforming use allows you to keep your activities. Say if you owned a restaurant, you can keep doing that restaurant, but if you want to expand it, double the size of your seating, you would have to then, go through the whole process and like rezone. So is that clear in this?
I believe it is clear in that, but again, it's up to your interpretation. If you'd like to put some additional clarifying language, I'm happy to review that specific section and make suggestions. I see Kim's looking at it right now, so I would also be curious from a planning perspective whether she believes it is sufficient.
So I will just read section 3, which would, 3A, excuse me, which would be what staff would be looking to interpret any changes to sites similar to the non-conforming use provisions for uses that we have in code. So section 3 is commercial cannabis cultivation prohibited. Subsection A reads, during the term of this interim ordinance, no new commercial cannabis licenses shall be issued within the Lewiston opt-out extension area. Current commercial cannabis cultivation licenses within the Lewiston opt-out extension area can transfer their licenses to properties outside the Lewiston opt-out extension area or to a new owner of their legally licensed property within the Lewiston opt-out extension area pursuant to county code. If we're looking at any changes of license type or changes to cultivation areas, I do not think it addresses. It clearly provides direction to staff regarding any changes to sites. I don't interpret it as such, but.
Okay, thank you. So the next one, Margaret, do you want to clarify what new licenses mean? So if somebody's transferring in and they don't have the new license, but they had applied before, where are we at on that?
And can you phrase it again, so if they transfer in?
So we have, for example, we have one that was kind of found later. The transfer application was put in before the opt-out, but they don't have their new license in their hand. And, that could be 6 or 7 months. The ordinance says that no new licenses can be done. So what's the interpretation of that?
So legally, if they did not have it complete, or if they weren't ready to proceed forward at the time the ordinance was finalized, they would be ineligible. So if Kim needs additional clarification, or if the board had a different intent, it would be appropriate to modify it.
So unless you had a license in hand, or had the license being issued and sitting at the department, then you cannot get a new license until we change the ordinance.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I think those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? I would entertain any motions.
I would move to extend this ordinance with the addition of the opt-out covering manufacturing ordinance 315-842, that also gets added to the opt-out list of manufacturing. I would also ask that we put in the words of no expansion of facilities, existing facilities. And those are the two additions that I would add in at this time. And then, well, I'll wait for a second if there feels like it.
I will second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. So for clarification, the motion states as is with the modification of no manufacturing would be added to the opt-out language, as well as the no expansion of existing facilities. Is that correct, Supervisor Groves?
Yes.
Thank you.
And also in this discussion, understanding this is an urgency ordinance, this is not the final ordinance, giving direction to staff to get this done in a timely manner so we can, all the other things that have been brought up on all sides gets taken care of in the permanent ordinance. I do want to point out, I wish people did better math before they give testimony, but that's a different story. To the person that was worried about getting their ag license on the ag parcels, we do understand that there's going to be a 2-year delay for new licenses anyway, so this will be taken care of in that time period, and they're not affected by this. And I wish people would understand, even in legal grows, that there may be a lot less impacts, but there are real impacts from this industry. And I just wish we wouldn't, I wish we'd face that head on and just really come up with solutions to minimize those impacts instead of denying that they exist. So with that, I'll get off my soapbox.
Any additional discussion from the board? Hearing none. Dr. Coombs, are you running the clerk or is Susie running the clerk?
I am playing the role of Emmett today, yes. So we had a motion by Supervisor Groves. We had a second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
And Chair Brown?
Aye.
Right. Passes 5-0.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and considerations. This is obviously a sensitive and semi-contentious subject, and so everything's appreciated, and we will move on to the next item.
Yeah, and well, we're at exactly for the bar. So it must be close to the Wildwood Road there.
I don't have anything yet.
That's where the dance is kind
You will. I'll get directions. I'll text you for directions. I know. What salmon
All right, we're going to move on to include non-routine or controversial matters that are listed alphabetically by department. A number of board or staff may request that an item be heard out of order. Seeing that there's only one item, I think we're going to maintain the current order and go into planning and zoning. 2.1, continue from July 20th, 2021, the appeal hearing to consider upholding, modifying, or overturning the planning commission's decision to make a determination for a mitigated negative declaration in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act and approve a conditional use permit for Trinity Equipment and Materials LLC on assessor's parcel number 024-220-56-00.
Excuse me, we can't hear him actually with this all open. Can you hold off? They're just leaving. We'll close the door.
Yeah.
We didn't hear a thing he said.
I'm very community minded, folks.
This is unknown fiscal impact.
You just read the order.
I'll be recusing from this item due to my valid cultivation permit. That's enough. This to Vice Chair Frazier. Mark, was that the proper order, or was I supposed to do anything else for public comment or anything like that?
Nope, you were perfect. Now you're welcome to exit the Zoom and Supervisor Frazier will take over.
Okay. Thank you all for your patience with my Zoom chairing. I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we'll kind hand this over to Kim for her presentation.
Thank you. Yes, Kim Hunter, Director of Building and Planning again. This is an item continued from July 20th, 2021 meeting. This was originally an appeal hearing to consider upholding or modifying or overturning the Planning Commission's decision to make a determination for a mitigated negative declaration and a conditional use permit for Trinity Equipment Materials LLC on Assessor's Parcels 024-22056. The project proposes a multi-use facility associated with commercial cannabis, which would include cannabis nursery, distribution, and type 6 non-volatile manufacturing operations. This item is continued due to the information provided by the appellant, which is Citizens for Proper Planning, represented by Attorney Jim Underwood. And this was provided, the information was provided in a letter form at the meeting on July 20th. And this is the issue at hand. I believe that is being discussed. Margaret Long, of course, our county counsel, is online and may have more to add regarding this item.
Thank you. Margaret, do you want to dive right into the issues that were raised at our last meeting?
Absolutely, happy to do so. Margaret Long, County Counsel. The last meeting, there was issues related to restriction being placed on this property that would, in the form of federal grants, that would ultimately, the contention was result in, if we were to use this for cannabis business, result in waiving of this grant funding and large repayments from our jurisdiction back to the federal government for this. During the interim, I have requested and attempted to review the prior grant documents. Unfortunately, due to COVID, those have been unable to, they're in the basement, and individuals who had access to them are not able to get them. But I did have an opportunity to do a number of things that I think will suffice in terms of my analysis. I reviewed the grant terms and conditions that are in the federal code, and there is very clear that the grant has a period of time for 20 years, which it is in place. Thereafter, the jurisdiction can request that the restrictions be removed. We are at year 30, so we're well within our ability to request that if there are still in place restrictions through the federal government on this grant, we have the ability to request they be waived, and in reviewing the conditions by which it can be waived, we have a very strong case to remove that. Typically, these grants, you don't see them lasting for more than 30 years. There's some that do a 50-year requirement, and again, since I wasn't able to review the document due to the fact that it was unable to be retrieved from storage, I can't tell you which one we have, but if it is a 30-year period, that is exhausted. If it's a 50, we have the ability to request. In addition, I did have a conversation with Darrow, who did review the actual grant deeds for all the properties within this park, Trinity Park. The grant restrictions discussed related to federal grant are not on this property. They were not reported as part of this property. They were recorded on the county building, the county HHS building. So at this point, again, we don't have confirmation that this even applies to the property we're discussing. And so it's my recommendation that we move forward on it without consideration. If it turns out that there are restrictions that apply, again, we can determine if they're still valid. And if they are valid, we can get a waiver from the federal government to move forward on it. In addition, I did confirm with Darrow, who is capacity as a county employee in the past was involved in this process, that the amount of funding received was not in the $2 million range. The amount of funding received was more around the $800,000 range for this project, and of course, amortized over a period of time. We're not looking at the amount that had been presented by the appellant. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions for County Counsel?
Amortized, what is the value?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that without doing that. We would have to reach out again to the federal government to see, again, if we were able to waive it, then most likely that would be the first step. If they aren't, then we would ask for what a payoff would be, and again, they would provide that number. But again, at this point, we're on year 30. The code says after year 20, we can get this removed. I would be very surprised if the grant deed had restrictions for more than 3 years in and of itself, but again, I haven't been able to review that. So I will do that, but again, there's no valid reason at this point to not move forward.
Thank you.
Margaret, on not exactly on that information, but back onto the ability to file an appeal without have previously made discussions during the process. I'm not wording that very well. Could you reiterate what you said at the last meeting on that subject?
Oh, absolutely. For secret-related items, they're required to exhaust your administrative remedies, meaning appearing at the Planning Commission and discuss and put on record items that you are interested in contesting. On this matter, and can confirm this for me, there was no objections put on the record related to the CEQA items. As a result, no one has the ability to properly appeal it before this forum. As the conditional use permit or other issues that are planning related, again, our argument, and typically as we do require folks to voice their concerns at the Planning Commission level. However, it's not as strong or strict it is for CEQA. CEQA is very clear that you can't jump in at the last minute and make concerns or voices. So on that matter, I do consider the matter to be moved at this point.
So one of the cases with that we have an outdated general plan. Is that considered a CEQA issue?
It can be. I mean, again, yes, that is a CEQA issue to a certain extent, yes.
Okay. Okay.
It's something else probably as well, but I believe that the concept is based on the CEQA.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions of staff or council? I think then we can open this back up to public comment.
If I can just give some parameters on public comment, because this is the second time this matter is being heard. It is appropriate for individuals to get a second chance at public comment. Typically, we do ask that you limit your comments to new topics that were discussed at this meeting or follow-up. We don't limit it, but this board has heard all prior public comments, so there is no need for any statements made before. But we will open it up to 3 minutes for any individuals who'd like to speak.
Point of order. Procedurally, why are we moving forward? The county council just said there was no grounds for appeal. I think that would be the chair's prerogative.
My name is Dana Ryan.
Can you hold up for 1 second? Margaret, are you still there?
Of course.
We did have a question. I'm sure you couldn't hear it. Is there a reason why we should move forward with this hearing? According to what we just heard, there's no grounds for appeal on.
This matter has a conditional use permit component as well.
Oh, okay, and so before you said that it's not as clear cut that so we'll basically be hearing about the CUP, not the CEQA.
Correct, yes.
Thank you for the clarification. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Dana Ryan. I'm from Weaverville, and I'm a little confused with Margaret. She hasn't read it, but we're going to move forward. And then CEQA seems to be a huge issue on any of the projects that I've done. In fact, one that we've just lost in town, we had to go through it. I'm just sitting here as I'm waiting for this meeting, and here's the pamphlet for the general plan, folks. We're so far behind, and we're going to approve something that's going to have huge impact on the community. Heidi Miller just had her statement about the fans, the loud noises, the smells. This is below houses. We're chasing out people that are old neighbors that have been here our whole life. They're complaining about the different parties about the winery using water. That winery's been there a lot of years, and I doubt there's been anybody that's complained about that winery the whole time, water, wine, grapes, or not. So I'm a little confused with that. One thing I want to set the record straight. The last meeting, a gentleman stood up and spoke for me, and I was in court. And another gentleman spoke up after and had stated that I was in court regarding an oil spill in a creek that I created. That is incorrect. And so I'm hoping that people are speaking for the cannabis, that you guys do some research. I would never pollute my creeks, I'd never tear my forest down like they're doing. So I want to clarify that for Dana Ryan. To speed this up and make it happen so fast, I just want to clarify a little bit, as the board, as the planning, why it's pushing through so fast. Is it donations? What's the benefit for the boards? What's the benefit for the community? Is there side money? Is it something's going on that it's making it so fast with our general plan that's so far out of whack? These friendly people, I mean, saying that I've polluted a creek, I've had a threat burning my house and my own shop down in Weaverville from these friendly people, and I can back that up. Look at the sheriff report. If you guys go through with this, I hope you're regulating hours of operation like they did for Eagle Rock. Noise, smell, hours, traffic. I hope that you guys are putting that in, because Con Ag had those regulations, hours of operation. And hopefully you guys, if you do take advantage of this, that you at least look into that. I'm not really even bringing up, I have 3 parcels in my house that's close to this. That's not really the phase for me. I don't want to smell it and I don't want to hear it. But I'm wondering about any of the other neighbors that haven't been notified with the general plan not being changed, and they have no clue. They're older, so they wouldn't have come into these meetings. I'm just wondering if anybody's taken the time to just notify them. It seems like it slipped through the cracks pretty darn quick.
Thanks, sir. Your time's up.
Thank you. Have a good day.
New Point, on the right, Weaverville. This application was turned in 2018, and it wasn't until last 2018, maybe winter of 2018, early 2019. Well, still, it wasn't until late 2020 that we actually got this noticed by SHN and got the CEQA part of it done. So this is nothing new. The CUP has been pending for that long. All the appropriate notifications went through. As a member of my community, where I live and where my property is located, I pay attention to what's happening around me as a citizen. All the proper things, channels, notifications went through on this part. And just a reminder what a conditional use permit means. It means we get to put conditions on this permit. So if CEQA, the CEQA document, if it's read and if this permit application was read thoroughly, you would see the restrictions that we have to do according to the FEIR and other CEQA statutes, as well as state regulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Tom Malenko of Douglas City. I am the applicant. And last time I told you the reasons why the project should go forward with the appropriate notice, going through the planning commission, state clearinghouse, all that. I did want to talk a little about this EDA issue, because that was new last meeting and I was able to do a little research. I'm somewhat familiar with EDA. We did those when I was a tribal attorney for the Oglala Sioux tribe on Pine Ridge. We used EDA grants there. One thing about them, EDA grants are only for a state, political subdivision of a state, which is a county or city, a district organization, which would probably be a CSD, Indian tribes, institution of higher education, like maybe Shasta College, or a nonprofit acting on behalf of one of those entities. Not a private entity. So Clint Robinson and Jerry Sanders, who were Con Ag, who owned the parcel in the 90s when this happened, could not receive an EDA grant. And in order to use an EDA grant on real property, the recipient has to either own or somehow lease, encumber that real property. you can't give EDA grants to private parties. So there was no EDA grant money on this parcel. Granted, it is within the SUD, and EDA grant money was probably used for the upper bench of the SUD to, I would imagine, develop some of the buildings, maybe Shasta College, but it wasn't used on this parcel. So even if there was a concern that the federal government, whose attention we can't get to address thousands of illegal grows on public land, is going to somehow become interested in a state license activity on private land. If that was a concern, it's not a concern on this parcel. It doesn't apply to this parcel. Otherwise, we'll stand by the MND, the findings of the Planning Commission, the notice it was all appropriate, and we hope that you deny this appeal and let our project go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dick Morris. I'm a long-term resident of Trinity County. Thank you for the activity you took earlier regarding the Lewiston folks' request. Much appreciated. Having been a witness to the evolution of cannabis in our county and its impact on our lives over the last 20 or 30 years, one thing is self-evident: the planners have failed us. Folks, we are way late to this party. So instead of providing our citizens with land use certainty in the form of a well-crafted general plan, we have created a hodgepodge atmosphere of conflict. But within our failed 20 years attempt to meet our real land use zoning needs has emerged the opt-out or the carve-out. Following the cries of our citizens, about 4 years ago, the Weaverville Community Services District footprint was established as a marijuana-free zone opt-out. Why then are we here today when this well-established concept is under assault? This TEAM project clearly violates the well-established intent of our Weaverville opt-out. As you work toward a general plan, please recognize the critical need, at least for now, for carve-outs as an essential planning tool. I sincerely urge you to deny this TEAM project in its present location. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Darrell Forzo, Weaverville. Unfortunately, my name gets tossed around a little bit more than I'd like. Just to understand, the EDA grant was a grant from the County of Trinity to develop the business industrial park. So access roads, surveys, all of those kind of things, the development of sewers and moving of power lines and all that kind of stuff was done by the county under that EDA grant. The EDA grant was not the only grant that was issued for that building project. There were other grants as well, and that's one of the reasons for the difference in the numbers that you hear, is that the EDA was a portion of the grant process that was done there. A little bit of history: there was a local business group that was trying to develop a business park in that area. In fact, I participated with that business group at that time as the owner of the title company. That didn't go into fruition, and the county basically took over and developed that industrial park using grant funds. So just to kind of make sure that people understand, the grant money was not to the ConAgs or whatever it was. It was a County of Trinity grant to develop the industrial park. That included all of the things that are there from the standpoint of the industrial park. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tony Miller, Lewiston. I guess it's kind of why we're getting here, as far as we had on our earlier statement of the clarity in documents. speaking for the first time on here, but my son, I've been born and raised here in Trinity County, born here in Weaverville. Community Services District, I think, had a carve out. I guess it's again on the clarity, going for other things on the clarity of that language. What does that mean? What was the intent of the majority of the community members who voted for this obviously 4 years ago? Then here we are again kind of navigating through some gray areas when something has already been established. I completely support actually industrial type operations for cannabis in appropriate approved area where the culture is embracing these type of activities. It's not hard to look at the zones or the districts that are choosing not to be completely supportive of some of these operations inside of certain districts of our lovely county. I support, where the culture and the communities that get behind these activities and appropriate zonings, and where there is appropriate industrial zonings for these type of operations. There's, not to point out any areas, but Southern Trinity actually has a lot of good people working diligently to do things right in this cannabis ordinance. And I really would, I'd get up here and speak for them in a second if we want to get around as a community or as a county member and support those operations. Seems like the members of this community have spoken, what they were perceived what the language would look like for any marijuana activities inside the community services district. So it's kind of odd that we're here in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chambers wishing to speak?
Good morning, members of the board. I guess at this point I'm confused what's even being appealed. I know there's some things that a lot of people are talking about different things, but some of those things aren't even have grounds for appeal. I find it slightly insulting to the members of the board and mildly comical in a terrible way that the demographic of folks being long-time, essentially at this point, residents and retirees of Trinity County who have been at the helm of the planning in this county, some of them in charge of the utility districts and whatnot for a long time, are passing the blame of inactivity and what we have for a general plan today onto the current board. It's not your fault, maybe Keith's fault, possibly Keith's father's fault, but it's certainly not the rest of you guys who just got thrown into this mess. I know you guys all know this. If you thought it was perfect and everything was going great, not a single one of you, again, maybe Keith, would be on the board. I want to stay on a positive note. I think that the facts have been laid out. We poured over this for hours and hours 2.5 years ago. Came to this ordinance. It's not perfect. I heard somebody talk about at the last meeting, where's the golden egg, where's the golden goose we always hear about. I invite more folks to come up to the FFA auction, which I think doubled its funding when growers got involved in it in the last 2 years. If you guys aren't happy with how much money is coming into the community, I challenge you to come up to the auction or to the Derby that has a $10,000 purse from donations. Auction's a great place for anybody to come take my money. It'll go to a great community, great cause. But there's a long, long list of great things that have come from this licensed industry in the last couple of years. Maybe they don't get the front page press. I wish that maybe the whole story was put on the front page. Licensed farms getting raided and the charges dropped don't make the paper, but a group of citizens challenging something that's years old, that's already has precedent. We've had an operating nursery CUP for 3 years at the adjacent parcel in this, and not a word of opposition, not a word about fixing the general plan, nothing. I hope we can move forward from this. I hope that we can get back to work and hopefully work towards having businesses in the business park instead of a homeless encampment. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers? Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Vice Chairman Frazier, we have Jen Hill. Actually, I have 2 hands raised, but we're going to start with Jen Hill.
Okay.
Jen, are you?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the board. Thank you for your time in this matter. I really think that we need to, excuse me, I really think we need to think about the cannabis business in Trinity County and it thriving. I think that you should please allow it to thrive because you have this choice to make this decision where you can clearly turn it around. This area is really not within the carve-out zone. This is zoned industrial. This is the perfect area. There's no one using it now. It's not currently being used. It would be a great place for business to thrive. Access to the highway, but it's tucked away. It's nearly invisible. We need this one-of-a-kind license in our county to keep this cannabis program alive. There will be no smell associated with the nursery and virtually no noise. Please allow this exceptional family to have a thriving business here, to pay taxes to you, the county. And let's allocate these taxes and the appropriate funding to allow this cannabis program to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next I have John's iPhone.
It's John Brower from Junction City. And I would like to remind the supervisors that there are only 14 industrial zone parcels in the entire county. And
I'm nervous listening.
many of them are in Weaverville and Lewiston. This project meets all the requirements of these license types in their ordinances. It could absolutely be granted, so I want to site this in an appropriate location, this industrial zone, industrial park, and deny the appeal and allow this licensee to move forward and allow this community to get to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Susie, do we have any other hands raised on Zoom?
Yes, next we have Chris W.
Hello, Chris Williams of Weaverville. I grew up next to this so-called industrial park. When the industrial park was created decades ago, nobody spoke out against the clear cutting of acres upon acres of beautiful forest that had existed. Nobody protested the potential environmental impacts of the gravel and sand pit company that later took up space that was across from designated wetlands or near a nearby creek. Most of this industrial park has sat empty for decades, and it remains mostly void and an eyesore. This project, along with the other businesses that have recently, well, the recent business growth, has helped revitalize this area. This nursery, this distribution center will be held to the highest, no pun intended, of environmental and regulatory standards. If every business in our community had to meet the same standards, then there would be literally like 2 businesses in town. It provides jobs, bolsters our economy, and most importantly, helps instill some pride in our community. Please, please deny this appeal. It's comical that this is even being appealed. We have an ordinance. This project was approved by the Planning Commission. And this zoning, industrial zoning, is the perfect space for this business. So please deny this appeal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chairman Frazier, we have Paul Hauser.
Okay.
Paul, are you there?
Sorry, I had to find that mute button. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I completely understand cannabis advocates advocating for this project. I mean, they're advocating for their self-interest. And as a board, I think you need to recognize that. The thing that kind of baffles me a little bit is why, as a board, you wouldn't send this back to the Planning Commission. At the last meeting, the cannabis advocates made a big deal of a unanimous approval of the Planning Commission for a project. That was part of their arguments. If we're looking at that, and there's lots of good reasons why people didn't find out about this as early as they should have, but if this project is as great as the advocates say it is, it should be a slam dunk to have it reheard at the Planning Commission and allow at least Weaverville's representative on the Planning Commission to have some input into that process. He was absent at this Planning Commission meeting. I would encourage you as a board to send it back to that Planning Commission. Give the public, now that they're aware of it, an opportunity to weigh in, and certainly have Weaverville's Planning Commissioner have an opportunity to weigh in on the project. The amount of delay we're talking about is trivial compared to the impact. If there's a desire to maintain some harmony in Trinity County, I would implore you to send it back to the Planning Commission and let that debate occur. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chairman Frazier. Next I have Andy Johnson.
Okay.
Hello, good morning, board. Andy Johnson, Weaverville. Just would like to speak in support of the business owner and would like to ask you to deny the appeal. I think we've seen that the CEQA process has undergone its official process, and we did have a chance. I was able to attend a meeting. I'm not involved in the cannabis industry, but I do think we need to have some compromise. We just heard an issue about opt-out areas, and the big takeaway from that is rural residential, and the key is residential. Well, this is industrial in the commercial area. When it comes to the neighbors that are in a residential area, I just like to remind everyone that there's actually a sewage treatment facility right behind the block of Glen Road there. If you've ever done any work, I have, as an engineering firm, we've done work in sewage treatment facilities. They are gross and disgusting and have horrible odor issues. So just keep in mind that the adjacent properties here are next to the industrial park. We have a treatment facility. Nobody wants that as their neighbor. No one wants that in their backyard. But we need to focus on a little bit of compromise. And an industrial park is a great setting for this, and I fully support the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Vice Chairman Frazier, I'm not seeing any other hands raised or no other chats have requested to provide comment.
Chairman Frazier, Jim Underwood on Zoom.
Yes.
I had via chat made known my interest in speaking, and so if I'm so permitted, I'll proceed.
Go ahead.
So, Chairman and members of the board, as you're aware, I represent the appellant, the community group that brought this to the board on July 20th. I'm going to just address the staff report and what it adds to the discussion and what it omits from discussion, as well as County Council's comments. First, I would say that the staff report clearly identifies the three general grounds for appeal. And you're aware, it's general plan consistency, CEQA review, and the adequacy of CUP findings. The staff report in substance really only adds new proposed findings, but curiously, they're rather conclusory, which is insufficient, and they don't address the findings that I raised on appeal as required in County Code Section 17.32.010. Those are mandatory. The staff report doesn't address the EDA grant, but the county council does. I'll speak to that in a moment. It doesn't specifically address the general plan consistency issue. Neither the staff nor county council really address that issue. And, you know, let's be fair. We've got a 1987 land use element. We've got a 1990 Weaverville community plan, neither of which are referred to anywhere in the record, excepting where I've raised them on appeal. And certainly there hasn't been any consistency findings based on the objectives and policies stated therein. That's the elephant in the room. That's fundamentally, among other reasons, why this CUP, you know, is fatally flawed. You can't make general plan consistency findings when there's not an adequate general plan. And so I see why it's not been addressed to the board. As to the EDA grant, there has not been a waiver. You shouldn't proceed unless and until there's a waiver, if that's county council's analysis. There's no recordation requirement. The letter I provided on July 20th had the guidelines. It explicitly says that the restrictions do not need to be recorded. They exist. You're on inquiry notice. You know that to be true. It applies both to the county and to successor owners. That's explicit. The other issues, because I'm running out of time, are addressed in the record. I would suggest if there's going to be any compromise and the board wants to proceed with the risk presented, that there at least be bonding or security to indemnify the county in taking the risk and going forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Susie, do we have any other commenters on Zoom?
I do not see any.
All right, and seeing none in the room, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Does the board have any further questions for staff or county council? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I would like to just make sure that we did speak about the bond and the identification last year between the owners and the county. I think that was just brought up by the last person. I think we had that covered, and that's going to be in the verbiage now. Also, this is just a statement in general. The person who came up and thinly veiled the fact that we are on the dole taking kickbacks.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Dean, but we need a motion before we have a
Okay.
discussion.
Hope so.
Would you like to make a motion?
Nobody wants to make a motion? All right.
Liam was looking for, I think he's looking for props here.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Liam. Then
I would like to make a motion to with the modification of the identification of the county from Tom Malonco, that we go ahead and approve this.
Just for clarification, you make sure you get your words right, because if you approve, we're going to be denying the appeal. That's what the staff recommendation was, so be sure that you get your wording right. If you want to uphold the appeal, that would be one motion, or if you want to deny the appeal.
I'd like to deny the appeal with the verbiage that we have in there, plus the a demarcation of Don Blanco between the county and his business.
Okay, we have a motion to,
I'll second for discussion.
all right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
I would now like to speak into this, some comments to help the public understand that this really is one of these defining moments where tomorrow you could wake up to a new reality and you could say, how did that even happen? Like many of the moments that we are all now presently experiencing. You need to understand that this is a community-changing decision. You need to feel the weight. And I guess I'm kind of looking at the people that are in the room. It's not really the people in the room that I'm talking to. I guess it's the board members. So as I look up at you, you can just sort of take it that way. I feel like the board members need to feel the weight of this decision. They need to be able to hold ourselves as governance accountable for doing our due diligence going in, as well as the outcomes that are going to be the result. I would suggest that for important community changing projects like this, that perhaps minimal legal noticing doesn't necessarily meet the kind of transparency and openness that this board should strive for. And also it has been said that by virtue of not having spoken into the Planning Commission's discussion of this project, that the ability to have one's voice heard at this level does not have standing. I'm not convinced that there isn't maybe a little bit more to that discussion. I cannot see how anyone's concern can be too late to the game on an issue of this magnitude. I would also state that the District 2 Planning Commissioner, as you are aware, could not speak into this because he was terribly sick with COVID. In our previous board meeting, with regard to an appeal that we were told could lead to up to 15 similar cases, I stated that I was willing to hear those cases individually, where COVID and fires interfered with an unfair decision, and I do not regret that statement in the least. I do, however, resent any indication, whether overt or implied, that his absence that day removes any District 2 standing from speaking into this. So I believe that the board needs to pause and carefully ponder some critical thoughts. One would be with regard to legal policy matters. So that EDA funding, I would agree with the comment that says there should be some indemnification written in if we're going to proceed before for certain we know, because that's just good risk management. However, I don't think it's appropriate to have that risk assumed by the applicant when it was the county that entered into that agreement. And just as a matter of policy, I think that if we do that, then we would need to enforce indemnification terms of all of our cannabis licensees where CEQA had not been properly complied with. And I wonder if our program participants would really appreciate that additional burden. More importantly, my understanding is that findings of general plan consistency are necessary for discretionary cannabis permits. And I don't see any analysis or even any additional information on how staff is asking the board to make a decision devoid of general plan consistency, which I guess makes sense because how would you do that if we're leaning on a document that is legally inadequate? So I don't see analysis of growth-inducing impacts into the entire lower SUD area, which lies right next to R1 zoning and a multi-million-dollar health clinic. When we address cultivation and allowing the nurseries, I see that our cannabis ordinance currently relies on a single definition, that of cultivation, to include all growing of cannabis, which leaves even limited growing for the proposed nursery inconsistent with county policy. And I know that Supervisor Groves will disagree on the technicality that growing a baby plant and growing a mature plant are different. And again, I don't see a distinguishing difference in the definitions in a place in the ordinance. And perhaps the larger question here would be to ask why a community cannot legally cultivate. The community that can't legally cultivate needs a provision for the availability of the immature plant. So if the board were to support this project, I see the county doing three things. First of all, inviting litigation that I personally don't believe we would win. Number two, failing to learn from the past that in general and community plan, the update must precede the community changing project. And I also see us disrespecting the right of this community to determine how its community plan will be written. So please do not misunderstand my comments to think that I disapprove of this project. I don't. I think it's a great project. I just disagree with the location of the project. Lastly, I would say I have received enormous pushback from District 2 on the project. Aside from the risk management concerns, District 2 has already said no thank you to cannabis cultivation. That formal declaration of an opt-out needs to be respected in all of its associated activities. Staff has said we need this, and the simple reality is that Weaverville, having no cultivation, does not need supportive services. Staff encouraged and posed the question, well, if not here, then where? And the answer to that would be that identical operations have recently been approved in Hayfork, and that makes sense because cultivation is largely centered there. Trinity River Lumber Company, which is the heart of District 2 economic viability, stands in strong opposition to the project. The Vice President states, and I quote, Trinity River Lumber Company continues to try and operate as the largest private employer in Trinity County. It has been very difficult to maintain enough employees to operate the 2 shifts that we currently have running at the mill. The number of job applicants we receive are quickly reduced by applicants not passing a pre-employment drug test. Trinity River Lumber Company does not need the county government permitting a commercial cannabis operation in downtown Weaverville that will continue to dwindle a prospective employee base or send the wrong message to our existing employees who will take the risk of job loss due to cannabis use. Past practice has been to proceed full steam ahead without proper planning. I lived that reality as a constituent. As a supervisor, I will oppose that mindset and its resulting decisions with all my might. So that said, I would like to place a subsequent motion on the table, and I would move to uphold the appeal and deny the project at this location.
We have a subsequent motion on the table. Would anyone care to second? Seeing none, subsequent motion dies for lack of second. Do we have any further?
Yeah, I have some further comment, and I think I get a little offended by the stunning shock that this is new and we had no idea what's going on. This community did make a decision in District 2 in 2018 when we specifically excluded the industrial park from the opt-out. If you look at manufacturing, all of District 1's opt-outs were put in. We went through, we had the discussion. There is a manufacturing opt-out in the Weaverville area, and it's the historic district. The people of Weaverville at that time, and I understand people have the right to change their mind, but at that time, this process went through the process. So 3 years ago, through that process, through the Planning Commission, through the board, the public process, I don't remember any objections to having manufacturing and industrial zoning. That was kind of the linchpin of this. So to say that it is in an opt-out, it is not. It was specifically thought through and not put into a manufacturing opt-out. If District 2 wanted to come back and do that at a later time, and can change that, I have no issues with the will of what people want to do. The nursery issue, you know, maybe that is a legal technicality. I will give the background on that. The license is called, you know, cultivation license, and then there's a nursery license. So no cultivation was designed to keep legal cultivation out of the district, and nurseries when they went through. So, you know, maybe there is a miswording in the ordinance that should be changed, or you know, somebody can go to court and stop the nursery side. But that wasn't the intent. And that would be also shown that a nursery was permitted down on the same area, where I don't remember a lot of opposition to that either from District 2. When we look at this, what Margaret is telling us is that the appeal really is only for the use part of it, and I don't see ask in the use. The CEQA part has gone through; it's been well vetted. So I would say 6 times. So we had the ordinance go through, planning commission. Well, first that would have gone through the ad hoc, and where people put in the words the ad hoc, then publicly to the planning commission, and then to the board and out. Then we had a nursery that went through the planning commission and through the board and out. And then we've had this go through the planning commission, and now, so that was 5 times through, and then we're here. But in the ask of the use permit side of this, I don't see a lot of asks of what you want changed in it. It's just, no, you don't want it. Now, when it comes to general plan consistency, that probably is the elephant in the room. And it's been the elephant in the room in this county for 35 years. And quite frankly, I'm not going to vote to stand on that. I'll let the people go to court. And if they want to go to court and shut down this county for 5 years, where there will be no development, no changes of anything until we do that, then so be it. But I don't think this board I don't think it's a value of this board to just basically shut down all business in this county until we get a general plan done. So, but quite frankly, I just don't see, I respect the fact that the Planning Commission from District 2 didn't get to have a say on this. And the appropriate use at that time is that the commission would have held this off until that commissioner could make it. And that was the standard practice previously on controversial items, and I'm sorry that didn't happen. But I don't see a grounds to send it back. I just don't. And to do so just doesn't make sense to me. So with that, my long-winded spiel, and I'll get plenty of hate mail for it, but that's all I'm done for now.
I would just respond to the portion where Supervisor Gross feels like the whole county would be shut down for 5 years. I don't think that is the case. I believe that this case could be brought to challenge only this CUP, or perhaps this and similar discretionary cannabis approvals. And I think that that is something that we don't need to fear the county being shut down until that's over with.
Yeah, I would disagree. If you have an inconsistent general plan by just the fact that it's old and outdated, that if challenged would cross all lines. It would depend on how people challenged it, but once you have that, any project, if it's the grocery outlet or Dollar General, anybody could just pull that trigger at any time and challenge them. So, but us two plain lawyers up here is probably not the best plan.
Supervisor Gogan, do you have would like to discuss.
No, I would just like to say I have the utmost respect for Trinity River Lumber's Frank Power, T. Sanders. But I do think if they're already losing people to pre-drug test failure at this time, I'm not sure that it's actually this project that's causing that. So I don't know how much this project would exasperate that, but it seems like they're going through that already without this project here, so I don't think this would add a whole bunch to that, even though I have great respect for them being the largest single employer in Trinity County.
Well, I've had some struggles with this project because I've been involved with the cannabis planning part as a planning commissioner for several years before stepping up to the board, and I do think I understand the argument, the general plan consistency, but to me that's something that should have been raised a long time ago when we were going through creating these ordinances and having findings that they were consistent with the general plan. We have an ordinance that the applicant's working under, and I can very much understand the people of Weaverville that don't want this in their backyard. I do find it kind of interesting that everybody wants to send it to my district. You know, there's a lot of people in my district that are way opposed to cannabis cultivation and cannabis manufacturing also. They just don't get the press that the people in District 1 and District 2 do because they're not here. I think that the applicant went out of their way to find a property that was appropriate based on the ordinances that we have. And to me, I don't think there's any real concrete reason that we could deny their project. I don't know how we would uphold this appeal based on the fact that they followed all the rules. Okay, we made the rules, and to me the appeal should have been when we were making the rules. They followed them, and so I really don't think there's any way to stop the project legally. I know that the CEQA stuff, there is a timeline for appealing CEQA, and it wasn't met. As far as the CUP, the only thing that we heard about the CUP was there needs to be hours of operation. When I read through the CUP, there's a section in there that only addresses noisy operations that are not allowed during the NSO nesting periods, and it can only be done from the time of 8 till 5, I believe, or 8 to 6. So the one concern that we heard based on the CUP is addressed in the CUP already, or I would have been more than willing to address that, to add additional conditions. But I think that basically what we have is somebody that's found a property and created their project to match our ordinances, and that's the goal. So I have a hard time denying that.
I hear you on that, and I have no problem with their CEQA. I read through it, and it's beautifully written. It addresses each item very clearly. I don't have any problem with that. I have a problem with the location. And so I feel like from the county governance perspective, to say that we messed up years ago by not updating our general plan, and so then to continue to walk in that and say, well, we didn't, so let's just continue to be okay about that, where we're right on the cusp of doing so. It makes sense to wait. If something is a great idea today, and that general plan gets updated, and that zoning remains consistent, and really what I'm talking about is the Weaverville community plan. These people should get to speak in to what their community looks like, just like the Rush Creek people come forward and say, we want to speak into it. The Lewiston people say the same thing, so do the District 2 people say the same thing. And so I just feel like pausing to make sure that we don't make those grave mistakes, that then we have to back up and find our way to pedal out as we are doing today and so many other days. To me, it's wise to take that pause.
And like I said, I think that the general plan consistency issue should have been raised, and we're not talking years ago, we're not talking the 1984 land use element, we're talking a couple of years ago when we passed a manufacturing ordinance, and as Supervisor Groves brought up, when the opt-out for Weaverville manufacturing was before the Planning Commission, it was the historical district. It wasn't and the whole way through this process, it's been manufacturing has to be in industrial zoning. Well, as planners, we told our manufacturing base that for cannabis, you have to go to industrial zoning, and that's what they've done. And so I don't think that it's inconsistent with our general plan and the way that we said our manufacturing ordinance is consistent. We had findings to support that, and they're working off the manufacturing ordinance. So I think that it's not as outdated as we think looking at the general plan, because it's been visited for a lot of time recently when we went through all these different cannabis ordinances. And I do understand that people don't want it in their backyard. That seems to be a consistent feeling throughout the entire county. Everybody wants it, but nobody wants to see it. And you're not going to find a place where you don't have a neighbor that's upset. It's not going to happen in Trinity County, and especially a place with industrial zoning.
I think, quite frankly, this project is probably one of the most consistent things that we've passed. But we still have to follow the law, Supervisor, and so this has been vetted and clearly and as of 3 years ago was the wish of District 2, and now it may not be the wish, and I get that. But I don't see how we could defend a denial in court. I don't see it. There's no, and as you know, I love a good fight, and we got the best lawyers around and they always win, but I don't want to send them a case that they can't win. And so to say a pause, and if we were talking a 6 months pause, yeah, maybe, but this is a 5-year pause. And
not a pause, that's a end.
And to fall back on an inconsistent general plan, that's the nuclear option. I mean, that does shut the county down. So anyway, we've rambled on. We're not changing anybody's minds.
All right, so I think we have exhausted our discussion. Dr. Coombs, would you like to call for a vote?
Yeah, we have a motion by Supervisor Gogan to deny the appeal. Are we keeping in the identification of the county by the applicant, seconded by Supervisor Groves? Supervisor Groves, how do you vote?
Yes.
Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
No.
And Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
3-1.
Okay. I imagine that,
Programming for the day.
I was going to say, I don't think that Supervisor Brown's going to come back to adjourn us. I'm not going to call him on the phone, so with that, we will be adjourned at 12:08.
That was much cleaner than usual.